Millions of IRS stimulus checks have now been delivered. Unfortunately, millions more have yet to receive anything at all. I'd say that their checks got lost in the mail, but I'm not exactly sure the mail is a thing anymore. Later in this video, we will be talking about just why people have yet to receive that money. My personal thoughts? That's a lot of checks the guy's gonna have to sign. Up next, a bit of good news on what you can use your stimulus check to buy. For people who feel the price of gas has gotten too expensive, you can use your $1,200 check to buy a lot of oil. In fact, you could buy all of it. And finally tonight, many frustrated as they try to get their money from a failing IRS website. The government's always done a good job of keeping money out of people's hands, but this might be a step too far. All of these topics, as well as a rundown on the brand new $480 billion stimulus package tonight on News. Let's jump into it today because we do have a lot to cover. Stimulus checks are finally being distributed to people. That's right, many millions of Americans have received $1,200 right to their bank accounts. Of course, if you're in an upper income bracket, you won't be receiving the full $1,200 and you might just be receiving nothing at all. Unless, of course, you're a small business like Ruth Chris. Then you're going to receive $20 million. It is nice to see some mom and pop shops receiving some small business federal aid like Shake Shack and Taco Cabana. And you guys were worried small business loans would get eaten up by big corporations. It was so silly. But back to your money for a moment, you might be wondering, why have I not received my money? Or why have I received my money and someone else hasn't received theirs? And the reason's actually pretty simple. The IRS is paying out money to people who have direct deposit information on file, which is a large number of Americans. In fact, over 80 million Americans have their direct deposit information on file with the IRS. That number sounds pretty big, but when you realize there are over 230 million adult Americans, it starts to sound a lot smaller. We do have to take a little bit of a closer look at these numbers though. According to this data, 8.5% of American households make over 200,000. If you make over 200K, you're instantly cut, so those people aren't going to see a dime. The rest of the chart's a bit convoluted because if you make over 100,000 as an individual, you're not eligible. But if you're in a couple that makes, let's say, 140,000 total, then you are eligible if you're married. Because of this, it's hard for us to know for sure exactly what percentage of adult Americans will qualify for this money, but I think it's safe to say something around 15% of Americans will be making too much money to be able to receive money from the government. That leaves us with something like 50 to 100 million Americans who have yet to be paid and are owed money. You might be one of them, and you might be wondering, when can I expect to receive this money? Well, there's a timetable that shows here based on adjusted gross income when you're going to be receiving the money. The government can apparently only seem to print checks at a rate of about 5 million people a week, and so they've staggered it where the people who are most desperate in theory, the people with the least income, will be receiving them on weeks more closer to now, and as you get further out, people that need the money less and are going to be receiving less money will be receiving it then. It does seem a little strange to me that in an emergency economic relief package, people may receive their money weeks or even months after the initial launch of the program. On the other hand, they are the government. This is kind of what they do. There has been some partisan bickering that's delayed getting the money out to people between the Democrats and the Republicans, but that's certainly par for the course. In fact, our government's always been based on a series of checks and balances. It's just normally been different ones. If you are confused about what's supposed to happen or you haven't received your money, I'll put a link below to the official IRS website to help you learn about what you should be doing. Just keep in mind there have been a lot of problems with it and it's the government, so yeah. But when you do get this money, don't mess this up. You know, you don't get money from the government for free very often. In fact, we don't know when this may happen again or if it'll happen at all. So when you get this money, take it seriously. And make sure to spend that money on exactly the same shit you were going to be buying anyway. No, seriously, if you receive this money, you should just treat it as money. Because that's what it is. If you're in a position to be able to save, you should save some or all of it. You should put it away. If you're in a situation where you need food, you should buy food. If you're in a situation where you need something else, you should buy that. If you want to purchase something and you're okay spending it on something frivolous, that's fine too. This is your money. This isn't money that the government can tell you exactly how you're supposed to spend it. It's your money, and part of that process baked into that idea is that you do get to spend it how you want to. Frankly though, I don't know why I'm saying this at all. People have always been great at spending money they don't have, so I'm sure they'll be good at spending money they do. We are absolutely guaranteed going to continue to see articles like the one we talked about in the intro where people buy frivolous or ridiculous items with the money. The point of that, of course, is to try and highlight the lunacy of people getting money. But that's just what people do. People spend their money in dumb ways all the time. For example, here's someone that spent some amount of money on a Gucci turtle. Poor little guy. couldn't even afford Louis Vuitton. Seeing this image might make you think this stimulus check is causing peak financial chaos. People are spending their money on anything until you realize that it's actually from 3 years ago. People buy dumb crap. That's just always going to happen. About 10 years ago, I bought a set of golf clubs that I used maybe 5 or 6 times in my entire life. Then I followed it up with buying an even nicer set just about a year ago, thinking I would get back into it, but then never went once. I have spent thousands of dollars on golf clubs I have never even used. At least this summer, I can pretend that the reason I'm not golfing is because I'm social distancing. That's definitely the reason. So when you get this money, I'm not saying spend it foolishly, you shouldn't. You should try and be smart with your money and save money and invest money, and you should do your best. But you should do that with your regular money anyway. Again, this is just money and you should treat it like that. There's one thing that will never change though. There will always be someone out there trying to swindle you into you giving them your money for nothing. And these checks are just gonna blow open a new industry of people trying to capitalize on that.
Hashtag Pastor Spell Stimulus Challenge. Donate your stimulus money. Rule number 3, donate it to evangelists.
This might sound bad. The pastor is asking for people to give him money. Doesn't sound good, no doubt about it. But he prefaced it with the fact it's a challenge. Kind of reminds me of the Filthy Frank, it's just a prank bro video.
Have you heard of a restaurant called Grabbing D's? Grabbing D's is right down the road.
No.
Grabbing D's nuts. Oh, got him.
Prank.
You just got pranked.
Prank.
Just got pranked. You stupid bitch.
But this isn't a prank, it's a challenge. So you can give Pastor Spell all your money, and then you can eat some Tide Pods afterwards.
No.
Back to Spell though, he was actually arrested the other day when he almost ran someone over with a bus who was protesting outside of his church. Looks like if you do decide to send your stimulus check to Spell, you know where it's going to be going. If you're interested in more stories of crazy religious people during the coronavirus times, I made a video a couple weeks ago. I think you guys might enjoy it. Put a link in the description below. And finally tonight, let's talk about this brand new $480 billion stimulus package. Some people might see that and think that means they're going to be getting more money. And that's not the case, at least not directly. It's not really a surprise that COVID-19 has hit small businesses especially hard. It's hit some large businesses particularly hard too. I think of businesses like airlines where their demand for their product has dropped substantially, but small businesses oftentimes don't have the lines of credit that's necessary in order to survive these rough financial times. Additionally, if they're not able to pay their workers while this period goes on, they may have to lay them off. And then of course, they also might not be able to keep their doors open because they can't afford to pay for whatever is necessary to keep their business running. So these loans are essential for many businesses to be able to survive during this period of time. If these businesses do survive, then once everything is back open again, we'll have a more smooth transition. However, you could argue that maybe it's just best to let these businesses die, new ones will take their place, and that's part of a free market. There are some arguments to be made both ways here, but the point is there is going to be a lot of money earmarked specifically for small businesses. As we talked about earlier with Ruth Chris, what qualifies as a small business might be open to interpretation. Certainly the giants aren't going to be small businesses. We think of Facebook, Google, Apple, Amazon, all of these types of companies are not going to be small businesses. But what exactly is a small business? In the US, the Small Business Administration decides what qualifies as a small business based on the industrial sector. So in some sectors, it could be much smaller than in others, and that will have an impact on who qualifies as a small business. The breakdown of the $484 billion bill is as follows. Over $310 billion will be given for loans for small businesses. And of that, $60 billion will be set aside for community-based lenders, smaller banks, and credit unions to assist smaller businesses that don't have established relationships with big banks and had a harder time accessing funds in the first round of loans. The deal also includes $75 billion to help overwhelmed hospitals and $25 billion for coronavirus testing. It's good to see money being earmarked specifically for coronavirus-based testing as well as for struggling hospitals. Hospitals are in kind of an interesting place right now. In many parts of the country, they're swamped. I think of places like New York. But in most of the rest of the country, they're actually at levels that are lower than what they were before. This is because optional surgeries are being canceled across the board, and in places that don't have a lot of coronavirus going on, well, then they're going to have lower levels than before, and they're going to be making less money because of these optional surgeries not happening. It'll be interesting to see where this $75 billion for overwhelmed hospitals goes specifically. I would imagine it's going to primarily go to places like New York, but I guess you never know. A big problem last time around with the small business loans is they ran out so unbelievably quickly that they weren't able to get to everyone. And I'm not sure what the most fair or best solution to that is. I don't know if they should limit everything lower so more businesses can get involved, or I have no idea about this at all. Frankly, I just make videos on the internet. Asking me to break down the total economic impact of this bill would be like asking Arnold Schwarzenegger to cure cancer, or asking Dwayne Johnson to teach you how to play chess, or asking Skip Bayless to talk about sports. Some things you just have to leave to the experts. But one thing I can say, I doubt this will be the last stimulus package that we have. We certainly are looking at several more months at best of diminished economic activity, and it remains to be seen what the total impact will be. I also think once you've given people money once, it's pretty reasonable to think about doing it again if the situation arises where you need to do so. So stay tuned for more stimulus check updates and packages as we go along, and I'll make sure to give you guys the news. Thank you guys for joining me today. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you subscribe to the channel. We've got a lot more stuff coming out. I'm working on this channel full time. We got a variety of videos I think you guys will enjoy. Thanks for joining us today.